Hey everybody, I want to welcome you to Fast Track Coaching. We are 3.5 years or so into a process. I actually get the time mixed up. I have no idea how many episodes we've done of this show, but we've had the chance to have a number of remarkable photographers on here, and the purpose of Fast Track Coaching is to invite you guys in on a conversation with some remarkable guests as we pursue the idea of pushing the threshold of our creativity in our business further. And today we are very privileged, and honestly, and I've said this to Tony offline, this is much overdue. But we have a legend in our industry who's here today, and it's Tony Corbell. And Tony, I'm really grateful that you joined me today. Thank you.
I'm thrilled to be invited. Are you kidding? I keep, as I mentioned to you, I keep sitting around thinking, gee, I wonder if he's ever going to call.
Well, it's funny, Tony, you're somebody, if you guys don't know, you got to just Google Tony Corbell and you'll see plenty of him on the interweb, all over the place, from studio to portrait to commercial, your own work. You're a working photographer. You're doing so much in the industry, and you've been around the industry for so long. But it is noteworthy that if people do Google you and see all your videos, it's almost like there's two different Tonys on the internet. There's the pre-Tony, where there was more of you, and then there's the current Tony. And I guess my first question is really twofold. One, talk a little bit about your journey in photography, but I'd love it if you could then follow it up with talking a little bit about your journey in life, as you've been you're literally transformed. I don't know how much weight you've lost, but it's mind-boggling.
Yeah, 130 pounds.
Wow, dude.
I lost a ninth grader.
A big ninth grader. That's funny.
I'll talk about that. I have no problem talking about it. It's funny how people at some of the different shows and different events that I attend, people that know me will walk right by me.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And they'll recognize me. It's like, wait, come back over here. I'll talk about that. But
right.
I talked a little bit about how I got started and a little bit about the industry and what a roller coaster. I mean, what a great ride it's been. I mean, we all of us. I mean, clearly you've had other guests, and you yourself. I've heard you say it from the stage. We are all so fortunate to get to do what we love, and we never ever tire of our work. We are always inspired. Every day we wake up. I've got a next door neighbor who's an attorney, and he saw me packing some gear in the back of my Tahoe one day, and he pulled over and he rolls down the window and he looks at me and he says, "Man, I wish I was you." He said, "I want to grow up and be you." He says, I said, "Why?" And he says, "Well," he said, "I've got to go to work," and he said, "Somebody's coming after my throat today, or I've got to go after somebody's throat." And he said, "Somebody's going to pay you to take a picture." How bad is that? Yeah, and I think sometimes we all sort of forget that. That thing is, that lingers every single day in the back of my mind, is how fortunate we all are to get to do what we do. So it's pretty huge.
It is huge. Now, so talk a little bit about, when did you jump in the photo industry?
It's funny. It was 1979, and my sister, who married my best friend, he had been a photographer in the Navy, and when they got out of the Navy, he bought a little photography studio in West Texas. Okay. And out of the clear blue sky, he called me one day. I was 24 years old, and he says, "Why don't you?" Or 20? Yeah, I was 24, I think. He says, "Why don't you think about coming to work for me as a photographer?" And I never owned a camera in my life up to that point. Never thought about it. I was never the high school yearbook guy. I was never an amateur photographer. The first picture I ever took, I shot with a Hasselblad camera, and it was for a client.
Wow.
So I'm a real weird. I'm not the norm in our industry.
Well, it's funny though, because on some level you are the norm of the new era of the industry, but that certainly was out of sync with, I'm sure, what was going on in 1979. My gosh.
Yeah. I mean, everybody was it's funny. We used to always talk about the photography. Most photographers started a lot like prostitutes started. At first you do it for fun, then you do it for friends, then you do it for money.
That is a first I've ever heard that metaphor.
For me, it really was. It was never a hobby. It was always work.
Wow. And
for the first 3 or 4 years, I didn't enjoy. I mean, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed what I was doing. I knew I was getting pretty good at it. But for me, it was always work. It was never a hobby, and I didn't go shoot on the weekends for the first 2 or 3 years. I was just working, trying to pay the bills and buy a house and cars.
Wow!
So it took a while. It took 3 or 4 years before I got this innate love for this that just drives me every second now. It took a while.
So in that, I'm guessing, so you were kind of more of an apprentice model as you were kind of learning the craft and learning the business side of it.
Yeah, I was, and my brother-in-law, who's great guy, and he had a good business. It was a high volume business, kind of a low end business. I mean, we sold inexpensive. I mean, the first wedding I shot was $295.
Wow.
You know, and we were doing a lot of volume, but we weren't making a lot of money per, you know, on the average.
Right.
We were shooting schools. We were traveling all over West Texas. We had contracts with 20 or 30 high schools, and we were shooting senior portraits, and you know, we were doing all that stuff. And so, I mean, I started out as a road warrior, shooting that stuff on the road, and then trying to do custom sessions in the evenings on weekends.
Wow.
You know, for clients.
That's great. Well, it's funny. The more things change, the more things stay the same. It seems like that kind of entry in is just a common reality for folks. That kind of, maybe not as formalized as you're describing, but the idea of hustling, you know, shooting the market that's in front of you that makes sense, doing it competently, caring about the craft as much as you know to care about the craft, and to lean in further and further. And as you went through that transition, then what shifted from that initial, like 4 years in or 8 years in or wherever it was? When did things become more refined and focused for you?
Well, I worked for my brother-in-law for 2 years. Then I moved to another town in West Texas and worked for another guy for 2 years. Mm-hmm. Then I was ready, I thought, and so I opened my studio in Midland, Texas. And from the second I opened my studio, every single thing that I touched, for some odd reason, worked. I started getting recognized. I started becoming known. I started winning awards. I was in no place, Texas. I'm in the middle of nowhere. And that last year I had my studio open. I photographed Sugar Ray Leonard, and I photographed what's his name, the tennis guy, that John McEnroe. And I mean, there's a whole list of these celebrities that I.
What's his name?
Well, listen. He was as mean to photographers as he is to umpires.
That's funny.
Johnny Mac.
That's funny.
I photographed a 68 heads of state in Nigeria. I did all this stuff in 1 year while I was still living in a town of 80,000 people. So, I mean, all of a sudden I started doing things that started being seen and recognized. And then I decided, all right, it's time to fix this, and I need to make another giant step forward. And I sold the studio and moved to California.
Wow.
That was a big change for me. And I came out here to go to work with a guy named Dean Collins, specifically to produce a series of books and videos and lectures for Eastman Kodak.
And for folks who don't know Dean Collins, it's such. I mean, man, what would I give to go back in time and have Dean around for a conversation like this? I mean, you and I have the common friend Julieanne Kost, and I've never met Dean. I've seen pieces of his videos and different things, but every single person I've ever talked with who had an acquaintance with Dean Collins consistently say there was never, and the mold got broken. He was the guy, especially when it came to education.
Well, I think the big thing that he did, Dean was a great photographer, and he was one of the funniest guys I've ever met. But more importantly, what he did is he changed photographic education. He took photographic education and made it into a business so that everybody had to step up their game. You no longer grabbed a tray of slides on the way out the door to go do a seminar. You had to put some thought into it and build a great show, because Dean would make you look foolish if you didn't. Because his shows were amazing. They were 12 projector, 15 projector monster shows. Wow. And people walked out of his shows learning so much about photography in a short period of time that everybody had to step up their game. So I think a lot of the great education that we get today is sort of trickle down from the things that he did, 25 years ago.
Well, and those videos are still available online, right? Like, people want to get access to it.
And what's funny is every bit of all the content is still relevant. The equipment's a little changed, and he's talking, totally different type gear, but the concepts and the techniques and the physics and the characteristics of light haven't changed at all. Light and exposure. It's all about quality and quantity of light.
That's right.
And that hasn't changed.
It's funny you say that. I was... the idea of the billiard ball or the egg or whatever, and looking at light, look around on top, and how light works, and like you say, quantity and quality, and effective light versus relative to size of light and distance, and all those pieces. Right. They just strike me as that's certainly not going to change. But it's funny, you guys don't know this, but before we jumped online, Tony and I were talking about the nature of what photographers are interested in. And I don't know if this is true of you guys at home or not. It's certainly true of me, and it sounds like a little bit for Tony, but a lot of us photographers, it's so tempting to get lost in, okay, so what piece of gear do I need to buy to make that happen. Or what, I've just become friends with Joel Grimes, and he's going to be on the show here in a couple of weeks.
Brilliant.
Amazing. I love him. And we're hanging out on Monday afternoon, actually. And, I was seeing him shoot, and I'm like, now, why does he use Alien B lights and not Profoto? And I'm a big fan of Profoto and why. And then I watch Zack Arias, and it's behind the scenes, and what's he messing with? And then Mark Wallace, another great example. I just watched his DVD on it. It's really brilliant on that. That's the whole Profoto side. But I'm so tempted to make it about the gear. But if you scale it all back, it has nothing to do with the gear. And it's just the gear or the tool. And we hear this almost as a cliche, but people still go back to, that's fine, but what gear should I get?
For years, we laughed and told jokes about, we could do it with a 50-watt light bulb and a bed sheet. And I think I'm going to produce a video using a 50-watt light bulb and a bed sheet. And I think there's some great work that can be done.
Oh, man. Well, and it's funny, especially one of the things I really do appreciate about guys like Zack Arias is his story was he went for it, spent a lot of money, things went sideways in his life, got out of it, had to work at Kinko's, sold his photo gear to pay rent, then finally got a second chance at life. And his second chance in the industry, he was really clear, no, I'm doing it on a budget, I'm making money before I spend money. He took his time and patiently got to where he needed to go. And that mindset, especially in this era where money isn't as easy as it used to be, is probably a really smart mindset to approach this industry. And so I'll be first in line to get that video that you're describing and talk about it, because I think people don't understand it.
Everybody's got to keep in mind that if we're doing this at a professional level, it still has to be a business.
Yeah.
It's our art and it's our craft, and we love it. But it's also a business, and you better take care of the business, or, it's like there's a friend of mine that's out in the middle of the country, and I'm not going to mention where he is because everybody knows who he is, but he's got a $6,000 day rate for his commercial work.
Right.
And I said, how many shoots did you do this week? And he said, I did one. So instead of a $6,000 day rate, divide by 5.
That's right.
His day, it's like you don't have a $6,000 day rate if you're not working 5 days a week.
Right.
If you're not working some days, that's a 0 day rate.
That's right.
So there's an awful lot of business sense that has to be made out of what we do.
That's right. And the other thing I think, too, for folks who are listening at home, and I think you'd agree with this, is because some of the challenges, I know I have this experience myself where I'll go, but I blew it. I tried to buy my way in this category, or, I don't spend enough time, or, gosh, based on what you just said, I guess my day rate just dropped, which is true. And at the same time, there's hope when you can pause and go, but I can go again. I'm an entrepreneur. I can reinvent.
Absolutely.
I can jump into it.
Absolutely. And how many people do you and I know that have done that?
Oh, yeah. Well, and they're the ones that are still in the conversation.
I stopped shooting traditional portraits and weddings in the late 80s and said, I'm not doing it anymore. I want to move more into the world of commercial photography. Mm-hmm. And I asked an art director who was a portrait client of mine. And I said, how am I going to do this? And she said, get all these portraits off your walls and start showing some commercial work. She said, get that stuff off. And I took all that stuff off the walls. And I went out. I had a brand new Z28 Camaro. I shot my new Camaro. I went and photographed. I had a new watch. I photographed my watch. I went and photographed a petroleum chemical plant. I photographed all these commercial things and made these 24-30s and hung them all over the studio. And I was still shooting weddings and portraits, but I had all this commercial work hanging until somebody looked around and went, do you do commercial work? Absolutely. And this guy says, do you do aerials? I said, certainly. I'd never shot an aerial in my life. I said, of course I shoot aerials. He said, this was in Texas, he said, can you go up to Oklahoma and shoot some aerial work of our oil rigs? And I went, absolutely. I mean, it was a perfect entry into the business. As soon as he left and I got the job booked, I called everybody I know and said, how do I shoot aerials?
Well, yeah. Well, it's funny. It's funny. I think that idea of problem solving, like, I think the cynic might hear that comment and go, oh, okay, so it's fake it till you make it. And that's not what you're saying. What I'm hearing you say is like, no, it's not at all. Like, you understand conceptually what to do, and you just haven't had the rep in that category yet. Yeah. And photographers at core, like I've heard photographers be described metaphorically as magicians, but I think a better metaphor that I've also heard is we're really problem solvers. Right. So we get into a situation with a challenging lighting condition, well, we problem solve. If our gear breaks down, well, we problem solve. Right. If a client wants something you've never shot before, well, you problem solve. And there's never been more resources to problem solve with. That's what I'm amazed by.
No, you're absolutely right. It's like for me, the biggest problems that I have to solve are always lighting issues. So I walk into a situation, I've only got 4 responses of answers. There's only 4 answers for me. And those are what I call the 4 applications of light. And so when I walk into any situation, I'm going to use one of those 4 applications. And so it's a real simple, it's math for me. It's
okay, so just so you know, everyone who's listening to this call just went, okay, wait a second. Tony's got the 4 magic, what's in the Tony magic black box?
The applications of light.
Yeah.
No, it's think about it. It's either additive light, it's additive, subtractive, transmission, or reflective. Right? I'm either adding light to a given lighting situation, I'm subtracting light away to make the light quality better, right? Or I'm transmitting light through some type of a diffuser or an interrupter.
Or light modifier.
Or I'm reflecting light off of something, like that 12-foot white wall right in front of me. So it's one of those 4 tools, period. And I've only got 4 lights to work with, and that's ambient light, sunlight, portable flash, and studio strobes. So as long as I know I've got one of those 4 applications and one of those 4 tools, that's all I have to think about. Everything else falls into place after I know those 4 things.
Well, how do you do that in an aerial photo? I guess you got a big light above your head.
Yeah. Focus on infinity and pull the trigger. Actually, you don't want to focus on infinity. You want to back off your focus away from infinity and let the depth carry you to infinity. Because people don't know that, but you can focus past infinity and get yourself in real trouble.
Wow. Well, you know, I love the kind of methodical approach that you have, and I'm guessing, you know, you only get that opportunity, I think, with a lot of experience under your belt, and like you've already articulated, you've had different seasons you've had an opportunity to take on different experiences and to try different kind of pieces or genres within our industry.
Sure.
Talk a little bit about the transition point where, you know, the day you decided I don't want to do weddings or portraits or you know, now in your current world with, you know, the commercial work you're doing, we'll get in a minute to talking a little bit about your relationship with Nick and what you're doing there. But in those, because there's so many people who are in this transition point, they're watching this conversation right now and they're going, man, I'm in between. And it could be even in between, like they just got fired in a whole other industry and now they decided, gosh, got to make it with photography. What story are you telling yourself in that transition moment that is most resourceful to get yourself in a more kind of foundationally sound position in this new genre that you choose?
I can tell you how I did it and what keeps me, what drives me, and that is I'm a photographer. And it doesn't matter if I'm photographing a 3-year-old or a Lamborghini, I'm a photographer. And as long as I keep that one statement in mind, I can determine where I'm going to fit in there. It's kind of like I taught studio lighting at Brooks Institute for a short time, for 3 years. And one time a student was in there talking to me while another instructor was standing next to him, a guy named Ralph Clevenger. And Ralph is a brilliant stock photographer and nature photographer. And the student said, I'm confused, guys. I'm confused on my major. Do I want to major in commercial or industrial? And Ralph said, it doesn't matter. And the guy went, what do you mean it doesn't matter? And Ralph said, it doesn't matter. Once you graduate, you can shoot anything. You're getting the foundation of your craft. And that's what my point is it doesn't matter which genre you trip out into. Whether I know that you're in a little bit of a transition. You know, you and I talked about that.
That's right.
And I know that it doesn't really matter which spoke of this wheel you head off in which direction. It doesn't matter. You understand the craft. And once you understand the craft, everything else falls into place. And then it's just a different set of tools.
Right.
And it's like, as I understand all my tools in photography, it doesn't matter if I'm photographing a car or a 3-year-old. I just will choose a different tool and how I accomplish the task. And the speed with which I work, the quality with which I deliver, and you know, sometimes, don't forget this part for those of you that are new, sometimes it's about the show you put on for the client. You know?
Well, no question. I mean, the impact that you have for folks is significant. And regardless, like, if you have confidence, if you're likable, if you have a personality that can connect, that has a massive impact or effect on the people we get to work with. And if they're put at ease, guess what? It's easier to take someone's photograph, or it's easy to...
I heard one of our favorite annual report clients several years ago. He became a really good client, but for years we couldn't get in, and we really wanted to be in. And finally, one time I asked him, I said, why can we not get in with your company? And he said, because I'm friends with all these photographers that I work with. And he said, I don't care if you're good or even better than they are. You can't break those relationships. We manage relationships. That's what our job is. You're a master at it. I'm pretty good at it. I think a lot of us at a higher level are really good at managing those relationships. And once you're doing that, you take care of those clients. You know that you've become best friends with most of your brides. You know that I become best friends with some of these art directors I work with. You can't not become great friends with the people that you work with when you enjoy people, and it brings you business for the rest of your career.
I'm with you on that. It's funny though, because I want to be sensitive to this, and I've gotten myself into some hot water in the past because people, I think my impact people have misunderstood a little bit, but I can appreciate the complaint then, as we're talking, from the photographer who might go, okay, no, you guys have missed it. You're not a purist. You're missing that it's really about the photography, and it's photography, and if you don't have all of the technique nailed, then you shouldn't leverage. I'm trying to be delicate in how I'm asking this question. What do you say to the photographer who comes back at you and says, "Yeah, you're just superficial. You're just fluff. You're just marketing"?
Yeah. Here's my response.
Yeah.
My response is, it's not about the picture. Anybody in town can do the picture. It's about the relationship and the fact that people want to do business with people they like. You're going to do the job. You're going to do it professionally. You're going to do a great job for them. But the fact is, people want to do business with people they enjoy doing business with. You can't be a butthead. I don't care if you're the best photographer in town. If you're a butthead, nobody's going to deal with you.
Yeah, it totally resonates with me. As someone who's been a butthead and lost business, and also as someone who's worked in the other direction, I'm with you. And so now let's now talk to the other photographer then. The photographer who is really likable, jumped in the industry, but doesn't have a level of competency. What do you say to that person?
Yeah, you gotta learn your scales if you're a musician. You gotta play your scales every day and practice every day if you're a musician. They run those scales up and down every day. It doesn't matter how long they've been in the business. A good friend of mine who's a photographer that shoots all the catalogs for LL Bean out of Maine told me one time, she called and she said, "Hey, let's grab our wide-angle lenses and go practice this afternoon." And I went, "What? I'm a pro. I'm thinking in my head, what's she talking about?" She said, "I haven't practiced enough or shot enough with my wide-angle lenses lately. I need to go work out with my wide-angle lenses." And I thought, what a great statement. I never thought about that. Yep. We have to practice and run our scales every day. And we have to shoot pictures. We can't not take pictures. Jay Maisel is one of the most well-known guys on the planet in the world of editorial photography. And no one that I know has ever seen Jay without a camera in his hand. And it's because he says, "I practice every day, all day long."
It's funny. I was just in a conversation with Cliff Montner about 4 days ago about Jay, and he was telling me about, here's Cliff. He's certainly gotten his accolades. He's a pretty phenomenal wedding photographer.
Sure.
And it's interesting the esteem that he had for him, and not just because he's famous, but because of that dynamic. And Cliff's an old. He's dyed-in-the-wool, blue-collar photographer, gruff guy.
Roll up his sleeves and go to work.
Yeah, and he likes to. He says, like, it's work. You get on the hamster wheel again. And it's a privilege to do it. But there is something about that, and it's funny because I know for me, I've said this on record in the past. It is so tempting to lean into strengths exclusively, and I'm a big fan of doing that. But also to recognize, okay, where are the blind spots, and how can I both leverage what I do well, but also take responsibility for what I don't do well, and constantly stay in that conversation around improving whatever it is lacking.
So many photographers. I mean, I'm not a business guru. I'm not a business management guy, but I do understand the whole SWOT analysis approach to life. And if you're not measuring your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, you're missing the boat.
No question.
What is it in our industry that each of us are weakest at, and that's what we need to spend the most time working on. It's almost like, it's like if you really, really, really enjoy photographing families, you're probably really good at it, because you do tend to get better at the things that you do the most.
Right.
And you get better at the things that you enjoy the most. So I love the challenge of walking into a commercial location. I love walking into a hotel lobby, and I've got to make magic happen. I got about 6 minutes to pull off a miracle picture. I love that feeling right in the middle of my spine, that little tickle. I love that. much more than if I'd gone and scouted the location for 2 hours and figured out exactly where all the plugs were.
That's great. Huh? It's funny that your tickle is another man's seizure, but that's
right.
Fine. Or woman, whatever.
That's right.
Hey, real quick, I want to make sure that we don't miss this opportunity. Tony, you lost a lot of weight, and I look at that as a metaphor. When you made the decision to transform yourself in a physical way, and I know you've already given homage to how many times in your life you've decided, I'm going to absolutely reinvent who I am as a photographer in this industry. And I want to hear you talk a little bit about that decision and also the process of that. What was that like for you?
It's funny that you bring it up. You're the only person that's ever interviewed me that wanted to talk about this. I'm glad we're talking about it. I think first off, I've never considered myself heavy when I was at my heaviest weight.
Right.
I just never felt that I was, because I was still active. I was still skiing. I was still moving. I was still shooting. I have high energy. I'm an active guy. Always was. But slowly, I was gaining 10, 12, 15 pounds a year. And I never realized it. I mean, of course I realized it.
Sure.
I let it get out of hand. Where it came to a screeching halt for me is I spend an awful lot of time on an airplane. I'll fly 100,000 miles a year easily, as many of us do in our industry.
Right.
Maybe more. And I was sitting in an exit row on a plane getting ready to take off out of JFK to LA, and I couldn't get the seatbelt on. I couldn't. No matter what I did, I was sucking it in. I was doing everything I could, and I couldn't get my seatbelt on. And I buzzed the flight attendant. I said, "Say, can I get one of those little seatbelt extension things? I can't get the seatbelt on." And she very loudly, in front of everybody in the area, announced that I can't sit in the exit row and use a seatbelt extension. It's against FAA rules.
Right.
And would somebody please change seats with this man? He can't sit in this seat. He's too large with the... Anyway, she just embarrassed me.
Wow.
And she didn't mean it.
Right.
She
doing her job.
It's her job. And 10 seconds later, somebody asked her for another Diet Coke, and she probably never gave me another thought.
Right.
But I had to change seats with somebody because of that. You can't sit in the exit row and use an extension. So in case anybody's wondering, don't sit in the exit row. But that night, on that flight from JFK into LA, I remember thinking, that's it.
Enough.
I'm never going to let this happen to me again.
Right.
And I started trying to lose weight that next day.
Wow.
And it's been a long process. But now I feel like I'm a 14-year-old kid. It's like I've got a whole new lease on life.
Wow.
My neck looks a little scrawny, and I'm a little drawn, and I'm a different guy. My daughter, who's now 22, her comment was, "Hey, Dad, your dimples came back."
That's great.
But no, it's been a great transition, and I'll tell you, I'm eating smaller portions. I'm paying attention to what I'm eating, and I'm moving. Think about what they told us all as we were kids. You got to stop eating and start moving, and that's what you do. You stop eating and you start moving.
Well, okay, so it's so funny you say that because, again, metaphorically, first of all, congratulations. It's totally inspiring.
It's ridiculous how good I feel. I was over 300 pounds. Yeah. There's a series of videos which I love.
The Pro Photo videos.
Is what I did. The ones on Pro Photo.
Yeah, I just watched a bunch of them, and I was reminded again, and I was like, I can't believe it. I can't believe this is Tony.
The first one on Pro Photo that pops up, the best thing I've ever said about my philosophy on photography is on one of those videos, and it just says it's on. If you go to YouTube and go Tony Corbell Pro Photo, you'll see the one. It says my philosophy on photography.
Yep. And
when the screen opens up with my face, it's that big around, and I'm just mortified when I see it.
I love it.
But I really liked what I said.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, a big change, big difference. I was 300 plus for sure.
Yeah, well, it's just. I mean, again, I lost a little weight last year. I lost 30 pounds or something like that, and I just felt like somebody took off a backpack, and for you, someone took off a human. Which is
I live in a 2-story house, so running up and down the stairs all day long every day was just wearing me out, and I didn't even know it.
Didn't know. Okay, so talk a little bit about metaphorically.
Yeah.
Because what's cool about that? I mean, honestly, Tony, I'm not surprised you had that experience. And the next day, you made a decision. It seems like that has been something you've been doing your whole career. Like at 24, at 26, at 28. It just sounds like you make a decision and you do it. How important is that for every photographer?
I was a smoker early in life. And in my mid-20s, I decided one day during one of those American smokeout things, I decided that's it. I'm not going to smoke anymore, and I haven't smoked since.
Well, is that a muscle that photographers need to be able to develop themselves for what they're doing in
I think maybe.
industry?
I think maybe so. I think it's funny. I read a story on a plane one time about a guy who said, "Listen," he said, "whenever you have a major decision to make in your life," he said, "you already know what you need to do." People talk about agonizing over the decision. You're not agonizing over the decision. Your heart has already told you what to do. Just go do it.
So what I'm hearing you say in that statement is, if someone is listening to this right now and they literally are having a conversation with themselves where they're like, they know exactly what it is that needs to change. Well, it could be in their business, it could be in their creativity, it could be in their personal life. They know exactly what it is. Enough. Do it today.
You know the answer, so go do it.
Go do it. I love it.
It might be, and the answer might be, don't change anything. But the answer might be, oh, you need to change a lot. Right. Whatever it is, you know the answer. So
and what are you waiting for? Sure. Okay, so there are two more things I need to ask you, and forgive me on the time. I hope it's okay that I'm indulging a little bit here.
I got all day for you.
All right, well, you're gracious. One thing I definitely wanted to talk about was your relationship with Nick Software. And again, we talked about this a little bit offline, but for those of you guys who don't know, Nick, N-I-K, Software, they're based in San Diego, California. And they have it's a filtering set of software that plugs into things like Lightroom and Photoshop, and there's a lot of usages for it. And they do a ton of things with HDR, with silver, black and white, with color. There's define all these great products. And we have the common friend in Julieanne Kost, and I want to give a little context for my question. Julieanne and I we're dear friends. We've been talking for a long time about her relationship with Adobe, who she's probably the world's best evangelist. Her and Dr. Brown are probably the two, and that I love the most. And
no question.
Their commitment, even her best friendship with Dean Collins, who we mentioned earlier, she's so loyal to Adobe, and we are so indebted to Adobe for what they've created over the years. Tom Knoll and everything he did,
right,
and the whole team there now. She's a fine art photographer who does this amazing composite work, and she's amazing. But very few people in the industry know that about her and what she creates. And both on the record and off the record, she has said, "I am privileged to be able to be in this industry as an evangelist for Adobe, for Lightroom and Photoshop, and this empowers and enables me to do what I want to do with photography without any encumbrances." And you are now in a season where, on the heels of a remarkable career strictly as a photographer, and then a little education, and now you're in relationship with Nick in a really unique way. Talk a little bit about the dynamic, about how that's working out for you, how that's like or different than what you see with Julieanne, and even if there's. And I wonder if the real question I have for the folks that are at home is there a lesson in that, in how you've set up your life, that they could apply to their circumstances if they don't have a chance to get to work for Nick or Adobe? Could there be something there for them?
Yeah, well,
it's a big question.
Thanks for bringing it up. I think it's interesting. Julieanne and we're really close friends, and it's funny that there's such a remarkable parallel between what she's done in her life and what I do in my life and what I've done. For me, I started using Nick software products 10 years ago, probably, when they first were kind of cranking up this little company.
Yeah.
And I realized pretty quickly that the tools were really, really well produced and saved me an awful lot of complexity working within Photoshop and saved me a lot of time. And so I started talking about them from the stage. I've been doing seminars and workshops for 20 years, and I've been talking about Nick a lot along the way.
Right.
And it's funny, Dean Collins, once again, his name pops up. Dean had a very good friendship and relationship with the people here at Nick.
Oh, interesting.
And actually, at Dean's funeral, I gave the eulogy, and afterwards, I sat and talked with some of these guys from Nick, the partners in the company. Mm. And fast forward a couple of years, so these guys called me out of the clear blue sky and said, "Can you come in and talk to us? We want to talk to you." And so Ed Sanchez, the executive VP, and I sat down, and he said, "I think Nick is growing and can grow in such a direction that we need somebody of your caliber to come on." As sort of director of education, senior manager of education, and kind of help educate people on how to use these great tools. Mm. So I came on board as a consultant for a while, and I produced a bunch of videos for them, and some little booklets and some how-tos and PDFs and books and things. And their relationship with Nikon was then forming, and I helped produce all the Nikon tutorials on how to use Nikon's Capture X2.
Right.
At the time. So we had this great relationship going, and then they offered me to come on full-time And I said, I'll do it, but I said, you guys have to trust me, and you've got to let me stay current and relevant. So let me continue to shoot some. Let me continue to work with a handful of my clients. Let me continue to do workshops that I think are important. Let me continue to write books and produce information and editorial and my videos and tutorials and my educational stuff. And they went, fine, do all that and come on board. So it's really been a great relationship, and I absolutely echo what Julieanne said. How blessed are we to be able to do that?
Yeah.
To have the best of both worlds, you know. And this company in 4 years that I know of has increased fivefold the size of the company, the annual revenues. I mean, it's really pretty remarkable what the company's done. So it's pretty exciting.
It is thrilling. It's funny. I was in a conversation maybe a week or so ago with a photographer friend of mine, and she was articulating her vision for what she wanted to do with photography, and she wants to really develop a particular niche that, in my opinion, isn't going to happen overnight. And I love her ambition. I love her vision of what she wants to do. She wants to work with a particular kind of client that's probably underserviced, so she has to kind of convince the market of a new concept of shooting that professionally. And I said, I love all the vision of it, but I don't think if you have a cash flow issue and you want to pay the bills like this month, that's a wise move to make. But if you really are committed to it, what would it look like for you to get a job? I don't care where, work at Starbucks, get benefits, whatever, but to mitigate against the need to
produce or die.
beg, borrow, and steal to get money in the door. That would actually distract from what you want to do, what you're committed to photographically, and for her that was both kind of discouraging on the one hand because she felt like, well, what does that mean? Am I a real photographer still? And my feedback to her was you're actually, in my opinion, more of a photographer, that you're willing to kind of take it in the chin, do what you need to do to put yourself in a position to really stay committed to the craft at that level. If you really want to go after that niche, I mean, if you want to shoot families or weddings, like that's available right now. You can go do that, but
you can make money at it right now.
Right now. So, what did you think of my? What do you think of my advice to her? Is that fair, or would you kind of tweak that a little bit? Or
no, I think it is fair. I think you have to do. I think you have to do what you have to do in order to be able to do what you want to do. And I think a lot of people forget that. It's kind of like. There is no such thing as a free lunch. You still have to put out the effort.
That's right.
And don't think. I heard this from a workshop that I did recently in Connecticut. I was talking with a photographer who said, "Yeah, but all you guys that are kind of at the top of your game,
right,
so to speak, it all comes so easy for you."
Yeah.
And I said, "Are you kidding me?
You're kidding me.
do you not know how hard everybody works?
No kidding.
It does take effort. It's our craft, and we love it. It's our art, and it's our passion for all of us.
Yeah.
But it's like that swan on the surface. It's so elegantly and so effortlessly moving across the water, and underneath just paddling like hell.
Yeah.
We all have to paddle hard, and I think especially to do the things that you want to do, sometimes you have to work really hard at it, and you can't lose sight of that.
Yep.
Sometimes there's 14-hour days involved, but it's 14 hours that you would gladly give tomorrow again to do the same thing again.
Right. So last question. Let's say that you get to hit the reset button, and you also get to get a decade or two back, and you know what you know, but you're not known. You're a non-known quantity. You show up in this time. Where should we put you? We'll put you in Chicago, Illinois, and you don't know anybody, but you know what you know. How do you spend your first 3 months to 12 months as a photographer? Like, what are the things that you're going to do first? And not just like generically in any era, but like given what you know now in this particular era that we're in, post 9/11, everyone's got a camera.
Yep.
What do you do first? How do you spend your time?
Well, if I'm in Chicago, Illinois, I'm going to go after the commercial world, and I'm going to go after it in a big way. And the first thing I'm going to do is come up with the most clever, funny, smart campaign I can, and I'm going to go after every art director within 5 states of Chicago. I'm going to come up with... A friend of mine here in San Diego did something I've never seen anybody do before. It was so clever. He bought a bunch of miniature junior slinkies. Right? Like 200 or 300 of them. And he made a new box for it. And his photographs were on all 6 sides of this box. And it was and there were all 6 different unique, fun, and advanced and high impact photographs of the Slinky doing things.
Huh.
Right? Imagine all the funkiness that you could do with a Slinky.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It's
he made the most creative 6 pictures you've ever seen and put those on the outside of the box and mailed the Slinky to every art director in the area.
Oh my God.
The guy tripled his income the following year with commercial editorial photography.
Wow.
Because he's smart, because he's clever. Nick Vidros in Kansas City, one of the top commercial guys on the planet, came up with the most clever coasters you've ever seen. Just posters for the desk with his photographs on these waterproof coasters.
Right.
Very, very clever. He also then, the following year, he sends out Pez dispensers. Every art director in the country has a Pez dispenser on his desk. Art directors are quirky.
Right.
You've got to be quirky to get their attention. So that's the first thing I would do. If you put me in Chicago and say, go to work, I'm going to be quirky and clever, and I'm going to get my butt in their offices.
That is great.
That's the first thing.
So what I'm hearing you say about that is there's a couple kind of meta messages in that. One is create. That it's not enough to just be a competent tech. You got to create something that
you can't sit back and say, hey, I'm a pretty talented photographer. Come on, where's the work?
Right.
You better go get it. That's the key. You got to go find this work.
That's it. So, and it's funny because we are in an era, and this is part of it. Like this conversation that people are viewing, we're in an era where it's never been easier to get content and educated. Like you can learn anything. I was just talking about Mark Wallace. His DVD on studio lighting. You can watch that one, 5-hour thing on studio lighting, and if you understand the basics of, aperture, shutter speed, ISO, and that there's a distinction between what your camera is doing and what an off-camera flash setup is doing, and you can learn a tremendous amount of information very quickly. But sometimes it's tempting, I think, at least for a lot of photographers that I talk to, that in learning it, that it's like it's scratching a mystery itch. Like, oh, I guess I've done something. But you actually haven't done anything. That's like in the category of inspiring and learning and growing and exciting. But none of that means anything until I actually go and knock on someone's door and say, hey, I'd like to work.
That's right.
But it seems like there's a resistance, more than I've ever... and I've only been in the industry for a little over a decade, but it seems like, actually a little less than a decade, like 9.5 years, it seems like there's a real resistance to putting yourself in that position to cleverly ask for work or to be liked, to be sought after.
Then you're going to put yourself in a position to go to work at Starbucks. Because you have to be willing to risk. You have to be willing to go out there. It's kind of like Dennis Reggie, when Dennis was at the peak of his wedding popularity. I mean, Dennis is a great wedding photographer. Yep. We were at a seminar together in Chicago. In fact, it is Chicago. He and I were together on this thing called Hasselblad University one year. Huh. And he was asked, a woman said, but Dennis, don't you sometimes just feel like the hired help at these weddings? And Dennis said, I am the hired help at the weddings. He said, to you guys, I'm some kind of an upper-end rock star photographer. But he said, to the bride's mom, I'm the hired help. And he says, I say yes, ma'am, and nod, and I do exactly what she asked me to do.
Like a good Southern boy would. That's
like a good Southern boy would. I am the hired help.
That's right.
So you do have to recognize, I always tell my workshop students that there are 3 people involved in every photograph you'll ever take. There's the person that thought of the idea of the picture, there's the person that took it, and then there's the person that views it. And to figure out where you are in the pecking order, you've got to figure out what roles you play. If you're a commercial photographer, somebody else thought of it. You took the picture, and somebody else views it.
Right.
If you're a fine art photographer, you thought of it, you shot it, and somebody else is viewing it in the gallery or in the lobby of the bank.
Wow.
And if you're an amateur, you thought of it, you shot it, and it's hanging in your desk, in your office. So, I mean, you just have to know where you fit in the food chain.
Yep.
And sometimes you have to humble yourself and say,
that's right.
Listen, Bob, I know I did that job for you 6 months ago, and you guys seem to like it. I could sure use some more work. Let me know if there's anything that pops up. I'd love to shoot it for you or bid on it for you.
That's it.
What's wrong with that? Or what's wrong with even asking a client when you're not sure how to price a job? What's wrong with asking a client? And I've done this a lot in my career. What kind of budget do you have for the job?
It's my first question every time.
What kind of budget do you have? Be bold enough to ask.
Yep. And creative enough to respond when they say a lot or a little.
Right.
If they say a lot, you better bring a lot of value to the table. If they say a little, maybe you can get clever on how that might be in their best interest in yours too. That's great. Right. Hey, Tony, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. This is not the last time.
This is great fun for me. And I looked at some of the people that you've interviewed, And boy, that's an all-star hit list, I'll tell you.
Well, and it's fun. I thought this a number of times, even on this conversation. Like, I don't think people really at home get. Well, maybe they do. I don't know, but they get just how I'm the lucky guy that gets to have these conversations. I don't know that and this is absolutely especially the case, but I don't know if I've had a conversation on this show where I didn't walk away with a sense of like, I just got to have a conversation with Tony Corbell, and he's giving me the keys to the kingdom of, decades of work. And I'm not trying to say that to flatter you, Tony. I'm really not. I'm just saying having these kinds of conversations, and if you're at home, you should be thinking, how can I reach out to the Tonys of the world and ask questions? Because one thing I love about our industry is there's a lot of good eggs. There's a lot of people who, if they're able to thoughtful, like in a way that they have to work, but if they, aside from their work, almost every photographer I know is eager to be supportive and help and encourage. As long as they know that the person who's asking is also looking to, look, if you get invested in, guess what? You get to invest in other people for the rest of your career. And I know that's true for you. That's certainly true for me. I feel so invested in. I am obligated for the rest of my career to be in these conversations.
Completely. I think that we all recognize that, at the top of the game, all the photographers that are really doing well are really nice people. And most of them will give you as much time as they need to, or as you need. They'll go out of their way for you. People want to help people. We all had somebody that helped us, That's right. So I appreciate you doing this, and I love the fact that it's all there, and it's free education, and it's just amazing. It's just amazing stuff that's going on here.
It really is.
These exchanges are pretty great.
Thank you again for being on, and we'll be in touch on a bunch of other things offline. But
hey, I'm only an hour and a half south of you. I'll come up and bug you before you know it.
Well, I can't wait. So be sure to check out Tony Corbell on the Twitter and on Facebook. You have a brand new website that just came out with Smug Mug, which is awesome. I want people to see that. What's the address for that? Is it just Tony Corbell?
CorbellProductions.com.
CorbellProductions.com. And
I'm doing a lot of webinars here at Nick. I'm all over the place. So
I do want to encourage you guys at home. Be sure to check out Nick software. There's some amazing stuff. I'm actually because of Joel's influence on me. I'm actually thinking of Joel Grimes. And Trey Ratcliff especially. I really try to get my head around what, for me and my craft, what I'm doing. What is the appropriate place of HDR? And I think Nick is at the top of the game in terms of with the software and the things that are coming out down the pipe. I'm so excited for all that stuff. So be sure to check out Nick. And the last thing I'll just say to folks at home, big thanks to at Adorama on Twitter. Go on Twitter right now. Right. Thanks at Adorama. If this conversation was helpful, if it wasn't for them, this wouldn't be possible. So super grateful.
They're great supporters of me and what we were doing here at Nick as well. These guys are terrific there.
Awesome.
Joel and all that team, they're all great. And Mason Resnick and all those guys.
Awesome.
Terrific guys.
Well, thanks again, Tony. Have a great day.
Thank you, Dane. Be safe.
You too.
Thanks. Cheers.